Hello, Tech Pros, episode 150.
In this world, you have a 98% chance of getting it wrong and a 2% chance of getting it right.
Welcome to the podcast where I chat with professionals who are getting the job done using technology 7 days a week. Each week, we start with Motivation Monday. Tuesday is about productivity, Wednesday, leadership, Thursday, technology, Friday, people and communication, Saturday, entrepreneurship, and Sunday, being unplugged. All right, let's get started. Hello, Tech Pros. This is Chad Bostic, and I'm excited to introduce our featured guest today, Chris Surdak. Happy Wednesday, Chris.
Hey, happy Wednesday. Good to be here.
Awesome. Are you ready to lead us through this interview?
I'll take a shot at it.
Awesome. Chris Surdak is an award-winning author, futurist, technologist, and former rocket scientist. Chris writes about technology disruption and helps companies navigate the accelerating changes all around us. Dude, what kind of rockets did you work on?
So I started my career, I was with Lockheed Martin, and I was a satellite systems engineer working on the GPS satellites. So we help you get to where you're trying to go. The Dish Network, so we delivered TV to rural America, and then also some science satellites. I worked on Terra, which is the spacecraft that is measuring carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and making arguments for global warming. So,
wow, that's so cool. I mean, we hear all the time, jokingly in just society, well, it's not rocket scientists, it's not that hard, or it's harder than rocket science or whatever, and you're actually building the things that go up in rockets and drive our world right now.
And when people joke about that in the room, I kind of like, oh, well, I guess I can get up and go now. Right. and now, much farther along in my career, because I left that work about 15 years ago, I'm reconnecting with many of the folks that I worked with back in those days, and we're all now moved into business issues, technology issues in business context. And what's amazing is we apply the same sort of dramatic problem solving into now business issues. So it actually was a good foundation for the work that we do now.
I love that. I love that engineering principles are so kind of mysterious and magical, and it's like wizardry to people who have never been through engineering or computer science or mathematical degrees or work along that matter. And so I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs when I'm doing this podcasting thing, and they're like, God, I don't know how to get all this stuff done. I'm like, well, just break it down into just like a project plan, right? You need to have your overall goal, and you need to do a little bit of research, and then you just need to break it up into all these steps and then tackle each one of the steps. It's not that big a deal. It's like, oh my gosh, you just blew my mind.
It's not a big deal, but it is a big deal. And the discipline that we had in the space industry, because if you miss something, if you got a calculation wrong, then people died, right, or you lost $1 billion in a second, literally. And I marvel at, it was about 2 months ago, the latest spacecraft that we sent to Jupiter arrived at Jupiter however many billions of miles away, and after 15 years, and it got there with less than a second of error, which is absolutely staggering. But that's the level of analysis and prediction that we would do in that business. And so when myself and my colleagues, we got into the business world outside of space engineering, and people are kind of like, well, we'll make it up as we go, and it's too difficult to quantify. We kind of looked at them and said, well, no, we didn't understand that mindset. You actually should be able to make a fair degree of predictions, but then also be flexible enough to anticipate where you might need to change in the future and do so. And in fact, that's how they got there with 1 second of accuracy, is they measured themselves along the way, and they adjusted along the way so that several billion miles later, you nail it.
That's awesome. It's just a great example of a goal way out in the future, and you think about, okay, I'm just gonna set my goal. I'm gonna put a plan in place. I'm gonna fire and forget, but it's not fire and forget, right? There's course correction along the way, a constant, like miniature little thrust vector here, like go a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, but making course corrections along the way to hit your goal.
And those sorts of principles, and you get it exactly right, the course corrections along the way, that's a lot of what I talk about in my latest book, where one of the key principles is frequent fast failure, which is how we refer to it in the space business. You didn't try things out for the first time when you went to the launch pad, because that's $1 billion question to be answered. You blew up in the lab, learned from your mistakes, and then when you finally were ready to do a launch, you had a much higher probability of success. Which is completely the opposite of how most organizations have trained themselves over the last 60 years. We've been following the Edward Deming principle of constant incremental change, make slight improvements into what we do, and we've developed a certain fear of being wrong. One of the overriding things I find in business today is that people are terrified to make a mistake. Or to ever be wrong. And so what we do is we do everything we possibly can to not make a decision in case we're wrong. And as a result, you spend years. And I joke, we have tiger teams with subcommittees that are going to do an analysis and create a model and then have an RFI for an RFP and all these things we do that feel productive. But really, the point of all that activity is to try to avoid ever making a mistake. Mistakes are inevitable. The faster you get to the mistake and the smaller you make the consequences, the more likely you converge on the right answer.
So, Chris, I love this topic. It's a big hot button for me, and I can't wait to get into it in more detail. But as you know, today is Leadership Wednesday on Hello Tech Pros, and it's all about being the leader that wants to get our teams to that goal. Right? We want to be the leader who puts these not just little incremental changes, but really big goals in front of our team and challenge them and say, we can get to Jupiter. We can get there within a second of predictiveness. I don't know what the word is, but we can predict that we're going to get there within a second of when we actually make it. And it is outside the realms of possibility in many minds, but we know that we can do it. Now let's get together and dream big and do big. But, sometimes we have these experiences where we don't work for that person. We work for a horrible boss. Now, I don't want you to name names or feel like you have to throw anybody under the bus, because we're not about that around here on Hello Tech Pros. But what I would like you to do is tell us that story of a time in your personal life, in your career, or outside of your career, when you saw example of a horrible boss that did not exhibit the behaviors that you like.
You can argue left and right all over the place of what is the definition of a horrible boss, and frequently it's just someone with a different viewpoint of yours. But throughout my career, I've made the distinction between managers and leaders, and those are dramatically different things, and not everyone gets that. The compelling goal that we all want to feel like we're making a contribution and we're making a difference, or at least most of us do. And when we feel that way, we rise to the occasion. When Kennedy said, "Hey, we're going to go to the moon in less than 10 years," that was a huge challenge. And so we want to feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves to a certain extent. And so engaging in that sense in people is that distinction between leadership and management. And so I look to instances where not only do people in leadership positions not put that challenge out there to people and paint a picture of why we want to do something to stretch ourselves. They dive into the minutiae of operationalness, and I think that's massively demotivating. I'll never forget it. I was with an organization a few years back where we were going through our annual reviews. And part of the process of annual reviews is, there's a bunch of qualitative metrics or things where they score you 1 to 5. And then there's some quantitative things. For probably a decade or two now, HR has tried to quantify how we measure people so that there's more firmness to it. And in this organization, one of the metrics they came up with, because they had nothing else to measure, was how timely did you fill out your time cards?
Oh, wow.
And how timely were you with submitting your expense reports? And in the absence of any other metrics, this was viewed as important. So my manager and I were going through the list of here's all this stuff that we kept track of, and 5 out of 5 on customer satisfaction and delivery metrics and impact on the business. All the qualitative things. Fortunately, I was hitting 5 out of 5 on all of them. And then we get to the end and they're like, well, yeah, 3 of your expense reports last year you filed, after noon on Friday. And so we're going to have to ding you there. We're going to give you a 3 out of 5. And I'm like, really? Yeah, in every other way, knocking it out of the park according to you, but because 2 expense reports got in late on a Friday because I was traveling at the time, we're going to have to ding you. That sort of thing is so massively demotivating. And I find that we're going back and doing a lot of work with HR, trying to find new ways to quantify the qualitative delivery that people have so that you get better metrics than that.
Man, timesheets are a struggle for me as well. I mean, just in general, just the fact that we have to do timesheets, I really struggle with. I can see the pros and the cons, right? The cons are they suck and nobody wants to do them, and I don't want to do them myself, let alone enforce my team to do them. But on the other hand, I want to recognize that people put in Herculean efforts sometimes, and that there's a lot of work that goes unnoticed. And keeping operations up and running and making sure the servers are all running and the code's all at high quality and the rockets are launching. There's a lot that happens that can get untracked. And if you're not tracking your timesheets, then you can have unrealistic expectations on the next project because you go, oh, okay, well, we hit our targets. It's fine. No. We hit our targets and that's great. But we did so because so many people worked nights and weekends and did so much extra work above and beyond the duty. Right. So I understand it, but it's also a administrative pain in the butt to do that and to get everybody on board with that vision. But then to ding them, dude, seriously, to ding a person on their performance review at the end of the year because they were late in submitting their timesheet, that's a jerk move right there.
The other example there is either the misinterpretation or misapplication of data. One organization where I was doing a tremendous amount of travel for them, they had come as they're analyzing their expenditures and so forth, because that's what accountants do. They're saying, well, we spent this much per month on your travel. We really need to cut that back. And I said, well, yeah, we spent that much because I did 150 presentations globally for you, right? And on a per presentation basis, it's actually pretty cheap. And then the further comment, which just reflects poor understanding of analytics, is that your per trip is higher than the people in your peer group. And I said, well, that's because I do 3 cities per trip, and it's just, it's funny how you have to be careful how you interpret metrics, how you choose what you measure, and what the message of those metrics is after the fact.
Yeah, such good stuff here, Chris, because, I don't know, there's just different roles in the organization that are focused on one particular metric or one particular outcome, right? And some people are just in charge of decreasing G&A, right? Or just in charge of making sure that this report, the green line is at this point in the y-axis or whatever. And they don't really take a look at the bigger picture of what are we trying to achieve as a company? What are we trying to achieve as an organization outside of just this one little metric? And that one little metric may be important in some circumstances, but in other circumstances, it doesn't freaking matter. We need to achieve this goal.
I've been writing and consulting with my clients a lot lately on this notion of, if you want to start innovating, you have to stop improving. And the improvement mentality, this Kaizen, small incremental improvement mentality, which I call it snickering, where if you've noticed, fun-sized Snickers bars get 1% smaller every year because they want to improve their financial performance. And after about 10 years, they're half the size that they used to be. It's so now if you get a fun-sized Snickers bar for Halloween, it's like barely visible.
I've never noticed that.
Think about it. Snickers bars are tiny compared to what they were.
I thought it was just because I was getting bigger and bigger. I thought they were big because when I was a kid, because I had big eyes and small.
Eventually, you recognize that, hey, I'm not getting the value that I used to. But this constant incremental improvement, which has just been burned into the brains of our organizations, literally prevents you from being innovative. And so when I'm consulting with clients now, how do we? They've realized that once you've picked all the fruit off the tree, we used to talk about the low-hanging fruit in business process improvement. Well, you get rid of all the low-hanging fruit, and then you get the mid-hanging fruit, and then you get the high-hanging fruit. Pretty soon, there's nothing left on the tree, and you need a new tree with new fruit, and so you have to literally destroy the process that you just optimized and start over again. And Edward Deming, when he came up with his quality principles in the 1950s, he talked about that you needed to combine small incremental constant improvement with occasional disruptive, destructive innovation. And companies embrace the incremental improvement thing because frankly it's easy. It's
Hmm.
easy to pretend you're 1 or 2% better than last year, but we all forgot the need for destructive innovation part that Deming talked about because that's hard. That's getting out of your comfort zone, and that's throwing away 3 years of effort after you've been doing something and trying to improve it for 3 years and starting all over. And part of my guidance to business leaders is if you have any metric in your business that you've been tracking for more than 2 or 3 years, it's time for a new metric. And you should probably pick the worst next metric you have. And that doesn't mean forget the first metric. It means you've extracted all the value out of it that you can, and you need to move to something else.
Okay, cool. So going back to Leadership Wednesday and this story of, optimizing for the wrong thing, optimizing for the timeliness of filling out your timesheets is probably a little bit of an overkill, right? Because you've optimized everything else in the business and now you're just trying to nitpick something or put value on something, right? So what can we do as leaders to build an organization that has a nice blend of this incremental changes when it's necessary, when it makes sense, but also this destructive innovation time where we don't have too much destructive innovation and nothing ever gets done, and we're constantly like blowing up trees before we pick the fruit off of them, but we're not just trying to make the best ladder to get to the highest fruit on the tree, that we're actually planting more trees.
There's a set of principles that I use with the companies that I'm working with to kind of guide them on this process. You can assume that your ability to constantly improve your business is probably very effective. If you haven't figured out how to do improvement over the course of the last 10, 15 years, you're in trouble anyway. So assume that your muscles in doing that are well exercised and in good shape. So what you need to do is go to the exceptions that you do have. If you're optimizing all of your processes, you still have something go wrong occasionally. Occasionally, there's still an outlier to your process, and that's where the richness lies. So if your whole staff that's Six Sigma trained and you've got Six Sigma quality, look for the inevitable errors that you still have, and then characterize why they occurred and what can you learn from them. In the world that we live in today, after half a century of driving for quality, you and I as customers simply expect perfection. And I talk about this a lot in my new book. You get 0 points for delivering perfection. I expect everything I work with to work perfectly every time. Instead, what you get is minus 50,000 points if anything goes wrong ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the richness of learning sits. Look for the exceptions to your process and understand why they're exceptions. And did that exception lead to exceptionally good results or exceptionally bad results? That's where the learning is. You're not going to learn much more from the 99.999% of the time you're right. Your chance for learning and growing and innovating lies in when you get things wrong.
Okay, so we identify one of these outliers. We identify one of these areas in our business where, what, we're rocking and rolling, we're nailing everything else, but this one area, maybe it's health and safety, or maybe it's customer satisfaction, or whatever it is. We just identify that it's an area that we've always kind of struggled, and we've never been the bleeding edge, like best in the world value here. Like, we're not recognized internationally as perfect in here. So maybe we take a look at this, and you're saying that is an area where we can apply innovation.
I'll give you a very specific example. I fly a lot, 4 million miles with a certain airline, and I I have a lot of status with them and so on. And I was rushing to a gate to get to my next flight, and one of their key metrics is on-time departures. Everyone in the airline is measured by it. The airline is measured by that by the federal government. This is an important metric to them. And the way they determine that is the moment they close the door, it's considered to be a departure. And so I'm running as fast as I can through a major airport to get to my next flight. I'm running up to the door, and they literally close the door as I was approaching the desk. And so in their minds, they're not allowed to reopen the door. Once it's closed, game over, and we're pushing it to the next flight. But in that one instance, that employee, broke with their rule and broke their metric and let me get on board the plane, which was a huge difference for me. I was going to not make a paid speaking engagement afterwards if I didn't get on that flight. And so now I'm sitting here today talking about this. It was someone that broke a rule that worked around a metric that they were measured by and allowed me to get an outcome that gave me a better outcome. About a week later, the airline actually called me and said, hey, because I emailed them and gave them a very positive note, and they asked me what happened. And I told them, this is the sort of thing that's going to make me a lifelong customer of yours and is going to make me talk positively about you because this person broke a rule and did so in a way that was tremendously beneficial to me. And so it's not necessarily innovation, but you need to look at where someone didn't follow the rule or a metric was broken somehow. Did it lead to better outcomes or worse outcomes?
Very, very interesting. Chris, I've got some questions about this. We as leaders, when can we, when should we allow our employees or expect our employees to maybe break the rules or look to set a new procedure, look to set a new standard operating procedure instead of just kind of going with the status quo? But first, we're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsors. This episode of Hello Tech Pros is sponsored by me, Chad Bostic. As an enterprise IT leader, I've gotten the opportunity to solve a number of different business problems, including field worker productivity, back office process efficiencies, enterprise system integrations, big data analysis, resource management, and IT complexity reduction. Each project comes with its own unique challenge, whether it be distributed teams, change management, stakeholder buy-in, availability of subject matter experts, or just getting one technology to play nice with others. Let me know what business problem is keeping you up at night and how you'd like me to help. Go to chadbostic.com and click the contact button or text "Hello Chad," all one word, to 44222. That's chadbostic.com, chadbostic.com, and click the contact button or text "Hello Chad," all one word, HELLOCHAD, to 44222. Okay, we're back with Chris Surdak. Chris is an award-winning author, futurist, technologist, former rocket scientist. We've been talking to Chris about, the difference between disruptive innovation and incremental changes and how you need both in your business to be successful. You want to raise the bar for yourself, raise the bar for your employees, and a horrible boss will just make you do things that just doesn't make any sense because that's the rule, because that's what we're measuring, and not really looking at what's the objectives that we want to achieve as a company, as an organization. And as long as you're doing things in the spirit of helping those goals, then it doesn't really matter if you're timely on filling out your timesheets or not. So, Chris, right before the break, you gave us an example of a time when you were flying, you missed the gate, they had just closed the door, but the plane was still there. It was still parked. They weren't going anywhere in the next 10 minutes or whatever. And so the gate agent actually allowed you to board the plane by opening the gate up again. And that was like a big no-no. That was like we'd never do this. And So it was a positive experience for you. You emailed the company, you emailed the organization, said, now I'm a lifelong customer because in this particular circumstance, your employee broke the rules for the sake of customer satisfaction, and that's awesome. So as leaders, when should we look for our employees to break the rules or to look for, hey, the standard operating procedure, the policies that we have in place are meant for the overall good, but these circumstances, they need to be broken for the betterment of the organization?
In my second book, which is titled Jerk, and Jerk, it actually comes from physics. It's from rocket science. It's a change in acceleration over time, and so for 3 years I've been looking at companies like Uber and Airbnb, these massively disruptive companies that it's 5 people or 6 people that create an app and they completely annihilate traditional players that are huge capital-centric organizations with lots of rules and so forth. And so for 3 years, I was like, how do these companies do what they do? How do they become worth $62 billion in over the course of 5 years? And what I was struck with is that for 200 years since the Industrial Revolution, we have been a capital-centric society. The basis of wealth and power in our world was: do you have capital? Can you grow capital? And how much do you have? And I came up with this notion of trinities. There's an analog trinity that for 200 years we've used to build capital wealth, and that is bureaucracy, process, and rules. And so for 200 years, if you wanted to be successful, if you wanted to move up in your career, if you wanted to do well, you had to become an expert at bureaucracy, process, and rules. And now, if you look at the Ubers and Airbnbs of the world, they realize that information is now the basis of wealth and power, not capital. And that follows a different trinity, what I call the digital trinity. And that's mobility, social media, and analytics. The challenge that business leaders have, and for 20 plus years, I've been going to school and training and learning to be the best analog I could possibly be, as have most business leaders. The challenge that we have is that the entire game has shifted from underneath our feet, and now a whole different game is being played. And all the things that we've done to build better bureaucracy, better process, and better rules, and to follow those things better, is now working against us. This is a huge challenge for business leaders to embrace and understand. The ones that get it are the ones that are still going to be in business in 5 years. The ones that don't get it are the ones that are about to be Ubered and they don't realize it. And this is it's a massive challenge, and it's the focus of the work I'm doing now with clients is you better start changing and you better start innovating, because the more you adhere to the analog trinity, bureaucracy, process, and rules, the easier a target you're making yourself.
Man, Chris, I talk to so many people, and I just read so many articles and so much, like clickbait on the interwebs that is complaining about millennials, right? And they talk about, millennials are lazy and millennials have these high expectations, and it kind of irks me because I see, and I haven't aligned it to this, so I love that you've put these titles on them: the analog trinity and the digital trinity. That the millennials just naturally get the digital trinity, right? They're all about being mobile. They're all about being social. They're all about having the right analytics.
Yep.
And some of us who grew up in a different time were measured and were rewarded for following the analog trinity, right? We were promoted, or we were giving bigger bonuses because we followed the process, because we followed the rules, because we knew the bureaucracy. And now this new generation is like, screw that. That's crap. I'm not doing that. But what I will do is work on the mobile and social analytics. And so, as if we're leaders in an organization where we have a mix of these personalities on the team, or a mix of these experiences on the team, how do we, first of all, recognize that we need to move into this this digital trinity? And second of all, how do we bring our employees or our staff along the way?
The greatest challenge that we have as analogs, those of us that are analogs, Gen X and baby boomers, is that the rules, exactly as you say, everything that we did to be successful to this point in our careers is now wrong. And we may not believe that, or it may take a while for it to actually happen, but it's happening. And our response to millennials and Gen Z when they say to us, "What, are you crazy? I can't use Facebook at work." Our response to that is, well, of course not, because that's not productive. The problem is that according to the new rules, that is how you create wealth, by operating in a whole different way. So the challenge lies with us. If we're analogs, we need to realize that we are the ones that are falling behind, that our old rules and everything that we followed for our entire career just doesn't work anymore. And I used the term jerk for this book because you can say, hey, I'm a jerk, which means you're embracing the change, or people can complain about you being a jerk, which is what I hear from analogs when they talk about millennials or Gen Z or these disruptive companies. And either way, it's happening. 200 years ago, when we moved from land being the basis of wealth and power to capital being the basis of wealth and power, there were a whole bunch of people back then that said, we've been following the king or the queen, and we're going to keep doing that. And then there's a handful of people that said, no, there's a better way. We think capital and democracy is the way to go. And so you had people like George Washington who were the jerks of their time. So this is a social change, and you either embrace it and you move forward into the new world that we're going to, or you don't embrace it and you take your chances.
Awesome. Very interesting. So we went from land being the biggest, most valuable thing, most valuable commodity, to then capital, and now we're moving to this digital information age, and it's all about sharing information. It's all about being social. It's all about being mobile. And if you're not on board, then you're gonna get overruled, man. You're gonna get taken out.
But between 2000 and 2015, this is a study that SAP, the software company, did. Between 2000 and 2015, 51% of the companies that were Fortune 500 fell off the list. And what that tells you is that there's a greater chance that you're going to fail as a large company over the last 15 years than you would succeed. And the rate at which these large companies are falling off the list is accelerating. Why is that? Because this social change, this change in what defines wealth and power in our world is taking place. So as a leader, one of the chapters of my book, which is guidance for existing companies, you better get uncomfortable. If you're making, and this is the first indication I have that I'm dealing with an analog that won't accept the reality around them. If I see a business leader that's saying, I am confident in this decision, I'm sure that I'm doing the right thing, I know that they're in big trouble. Because if someone is certain that they're doing the right thing, then they're not pushing themselves and they're not recognizing the amount of change around them. You should have like this, sinking sensation in your stomach when you're making decisions because you're not sure of the outcome. That means you're starting to get this right. I forget the name of the woman that took over Obamacare just before they rolled out the first exchanges. But if you recall, like her testimony before Congress was they were a couple of weeks from deploying, and she says, we're on budget, we're on track, everything's great. To me, that was the first indication that they're in big trouble, right? Because if you're doing something big and complicated and massively disruptive, you should be falling behind your original plan, and you're probably over budget, and you're not sure what the results are going to be.
Cool. Good stuff. Good thoughts to take back to our business and really apply to our teams and to our objectives, and take a look at, are we focused on the right things, or are we just playing it safe? Chris, before we wrap it up today, can you share any parting words of wisdom for our audience, the best way that we can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the parting words is in an age of disruption, again, if you're comfortable, then you're getting something wrong. And when the other fascinating fact out there is now the smartphone and the app are coming on their 10-year anniversary. It's only been 10 years. And in that time, there's been over 160 billion downloads of apps by you and me. 98% of downloads, you and I open the app, look at it once, and never open it again.
Yep.
In this world, you have a 98% chance of getting it wrong and a 2% chance of getting it right. And if that's what the statistics tell us, you better be doing frequent fast failure. You better be pushing out an update every week, hoping to find the hook to your customers, not once a year. And you're going to have to change your core metrics of your business to embrace this notion of speed and innovation, not improvement. So this is a lot of what I've captured in book 2, Jerk. It's out now. Definitely go look for it. And then just I keep a steady flow of information from my team at surdak.com, SURDAK, and also surdakandco.com, which is my consulting group when we go and help companies figure this stuff out.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining me on Hello Tech Pros today. I really value this information because honestly, after moving from, Fortune 100 IT management to managing other companies' IT teams and software development teams, to moving into a role of a podcast host, working out of my home and being very mobile and being very social, I have honestly felt very, very not so confident in my decision many, many times over the last several months. And that tells me after this conversation that I'm doing exactly what I need to do. So thank you for pointing that out to me.
Absolutely. Well, and as a fellow innovator like that, it's when you get on a roller coaster, some of us love it, some of us hate it. That sensation of exhilaration. Well, it's the exact same chemistry happening in your brain. It's just how you interpret the signal. For some of us, it's fun. For some of us, it's fearful. But it's always good to keep that in mind. That sensation of exhilaration and fear. It's the exact same chemical.
It's good. It's good. Yeah. I love it. I love the fun. And because at the end of the day, you know what? I can always go back and get another job. I can always go find an analog company that's safe, that's comfortable. Well, by safe, I mean safe feeling, I can always go back to that, something I've done in the past until the world is just completely changed underneath me. But as long as, I've got my family, I've got my health, all this other stuff is just in good fun. So thank you so much for joining me on the Hello Tech Pros. Listeners, yeah, you bet. Listeners, if you're an analog person like me, then really take a look at the situation going on around you. I gripe about Facebook all the time. I complain about how fast. Like, I've been a software developer, and now I can't keep up with how many languages there are because there's new ones invented. Like, during the time that we've had this discussion, there have been new technologies that are replacing the things that I'm used to. And it can be uncomfortable. If you're a millennial or a Gen, whatever they call them, if you're a young person that doesn't understand why us old geezers don't change fast enough, it's because we were rewarded in the past for following the process, and we were punished in the past for not following the process. So just bear with us as we get through this. We'll all get through it together. You've been listening to Chris Surdak, and I'm Chad Bostic. And until next time, take care. The show notes page for this episode can be found at hellotechpros.com/150. Do you use Slack for team communication? Join the Hello Tech Pros Slack channel at hellotechpros.com/Slack. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review, subscribe to this channel, and check back tomorrow. This has been Leadership Wednesday, but tomorrow, my featured guest and I talk about technology. On Friday, people in communication. Saturday, entrepreneurship. Sunday, being unplugged. And then next week, we kick it off with Motivation Monday, followed by Tuesday, productivity. And then we're back again on Wednesday to discuss leadership. And I'll talk to you tomorrow.